welcome to another amazing episode of Say It Online, where we help digital agency owners stop just randomly shouting into the void and start communicating meaningfully and effectively in this digital age. I'm your host, Say Gabriel, and this episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Nancy Content. If you're sick of conversion content being a huge pain in your agency's butt, especially websites, campaigns, etc., let's talk. With the smoothest content process ever, a team of unbelievably skilled and organized content strategists, and years of subcontracting experience, Anansi is looking to make your life as a digital agency owner unbelievably easier. Just head, if you're interested, to anansicontent.com, that's ANANSI content.com, and hit Let's Talk. And now, without further ado, here's our episode. Hi, guys. Today, I'd like to welcome somebody that I'm actually super, super excited to be able... okay, you listeners know I get excited all the time. But Mary Shaw, our guest for today, is someone who has really been an inspiration. She's been a personal friend and an inspiration to me for years in terms of how she runs her business and the quality of the work that she does. Mary Shaw is a UX designer, consultant, coach, and mentor. You can correct me on that, Mary, since this is unscripted if I'm off there, and is someone who, from the very first time we met, just had an unparalleled level of critical thinking and compassion. She was someone I was going through a hard time and really drew what was going on out of me. And so I actually knew her first more as a friend, but over the years, I have just been blown away by the work that she does, the commitment that she has to her time, her family, and her energy, things that I, still aspire to hold dear in a same sort of way. And quite frankly, someone who does amazing, amazing work. And we've been blessed to see her work and work together on a few projects. So she has kindly consented to be here today with me and answer a few questions about what she's been doing, her UX work, the group coaching program she just launched. Welcome, Mary. I'm so, so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Say. I really appreciate that introduction. It's very kind.
Awesome. So, Mary, UX is a term that gets thrown around a lot in our industry. So I'd love, in your own words, how would you describe, we all know that UX is user experience, but how would you describe the value of what you do for the user?
Well, it's not so much the value I do, it's like the value loop that takes place between the user and the business. UX has just blown up in the last 10 years, really, especially the last couple of years, thanks largely to Apple and Steve Jobs, shedding the light on it. But it's always been, to me, the two fundamental questions. It's like, what does this website, app, product, toaster, whatever it is, what does it need to do for the user? And then what does it need to do for the business? And if you can imagine a Venn diagram, I know we're on audio here, but if you have two circles slightly overlapping each other, there's going to be a sweet spot in between the user needs and the business goals. And UX, finding the best user experience, is all about meeting those needs and those goals in that sweet spot area.
I absolutely love that analogy. And I'll be honest, that is an analogy I've used almost exactly in similar terms for copywriting, about understanding the value of what you offer and the problem that the client is trying to solve. And it's the space in between. So that's really cool because I do think that UX and copywriting go hand in hand. Yeah. And I know this is something we've talked about before too. So how is it that, clearly this is something that, we're both passionate, and I ended up kind of more specifically in the copywriting space. What brought you to the UX space? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. It's over 20 years ago. I've been in digital design really since 96. So I guess that's 24 years going on that. And the web was very young. It was a young baby, and I was young too. And I was actually kind of trying to figure out my next thing. And I wound up getting hired at a software company in the marketing department. I had seen the web. I had thought it was really cool. And it was a short-term thing. I was in between freelance jobs in the marketing space. And I had like a 12-year career as a musician before that. That's a whole nother podcast. Just trying to find my way. And I was very fortunate to get hired by a publicly traded software company in the marketing department as an assistant. right, in the event planning department. But a big piece of that job was helping to run the conference website. And I just went in full, I just fell in love with it. It was, for whatever reason, the creative challenges. I've been doing some marketing work for about 5 years before, just different kinds of product launches and branding and stuff for a very small agency. But this was for a big company, and this whole mission was to get to the specific date. So I worked with the tech teams in building a website to support that and just really got into it. And thankfully, the company promoted from within. So a little bit less than 2 years later, I got promoted into the web technologies group. I had become very close with those teams working on different projects. And I became responsible for most of the internal websites at the company, and then some of the customer facing things as a project manager. And back then, UX was in its infancy, and I was doing, but probably about 25% of my job was UX related. I was in the field. I was doing research with our internal customers. I was talking to external customers. I was helping people sketch stuff out. I was doing sitemaps and wireframes before I even knew what they were called. And that really became my very favorite part of the work, because it kind of became the vision, almost like an architect's blueprints in a house. It helped to unify the team and get everybody literally on the same page, because we had visual references for what we were trying to build. And then from there, I went a couple of, mid-2000s, I went over to a large promotions agency, and I helped run Dove.com for Unilever. It was, we had a $2.5 million budget. I was part of a pretty large team, but I was the project manager on the interactive side. And I think we did 40 or 50 microsite and media projects. This was before social media, so companies always had like little tiny websites, about 10, 12 pages, that they were making for individual product launches and to support commercials and whatnot. And then, of course, their flagship site. So we ran these big projects, and the biggest one of which was a Super Bowl commercial that we built, the website that supported Dove's Super Bowl commercial in 2006. And that was a huge effort, got a lot of press.
Wow, yeah.
We were praying that 3.5 million people wouldn't break the website at halftime, and everything worked out. And by that time, my daughter was almost 3 years old, and I got to a place where the 70 to 80 hour work weeks just were unsustainable. And I needed to come home. She had some health issues, and I wanted to be a mom more than I wanted to be a producer. And so I stopped. But while I was doing that, my husband and I were like, well, I still need you to work a little bit. And so again, I thought, what's my very favorite part of this job? And I've been doing a lot of UX work. Again, about 25 to 30% of my project management responsibilities were UX related. I also I would hire freelance UX designers for like the Super Bowl project, learn from them. We had a couple other people working on other projects. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do. This is what lights me up. I wonder if I can do this on a freelance basis. So I just started freelancing. I got, when I quit my job, I got the word out that I was available to freelance in this capacity. And thankfully, a couple of people took me up on that. And that was 2006. So that was 13 years ago. And I'm still 14. Looking at my home office. I'm still doing it. I also took a few forays into copywriting and realized that, I think I'm a good writer. I have an active blog in the UX space, but I am not a copywriter. I will leave that to people like you and other wise professionals who know that world far better than I ever will. So.
Yes. I get it. I feel the same way about UX work. I'll be honest. I questioned when I first came into the industry and started learning about it. I was just like, whoa, is this what I always wanted to do? And then I started digging in and realizing all the moving pieces and the design and visual element that goes into it. And I was like, no, this is not what I'm meant to do. So I totally feel you there. So that's a really amazing story. And, anyone who listens to our podcast regularly knows that definitely a huge motivation for me in starting and leading and growing in Nancy was that burning desire to be a mom more than a producer, weirdly enough, because I do not yet have kids. But so I really, really deeply respect, that decision to step back and go what can be a much kind of scarier route, although one that ultimately gives you a lot more control. So it sounds like, 13 years ago when you went into the UX space as a freelancer, you were still doing a lot. And perhaps I'm wrong here, but it sounds like you're still doing quite a bit of production work. And if I understand correctly, the work that you do mostly now, and I do follow your blog quite a bit, is much more in the mentor and, of course, your most recent program, your group training program space. So what did that transition look like? Was it really kind of a time available, value provided type thing, or were there other motivations there?
No, I think people change as time goes on. And by the time I started freelancing 13 years ago, I'd say I probably did about 50% production work, 50% UX, and it evolved. It took a couple of years before it became a primarily UX consulting work. I think by 2008, I'd say that I just kept getting calls for project management. And it was hard to say no. So yeah, and that it was just kind of a really organic thing. I've always kind of had an unwritten rule that I didn't want to work more than 20 hours a week. And for me, and it was just because of the needs of my family. I have some things happening at home that just really need to take precedence over work, but also still needed to have some income coming in to help the family. If there's anything nice about things that happen in your life that you wish didn't, they make decisions really easy. I cannot work more than 20 hours a week. I have different responsibilities at home that have to take precedence over any kind of income generating stuff. So it's a really easy decision, So if the cool thing about project management is it's all consuming. And so of course I can't do it.
That makes a lot of sense. That definitely makes a lot of sense.
What I would find is when I was freelancing, I used to do a lot of freelancing for New York City ad agencies, just throughout Manhattan, and they would call up and consistently the 20-hour rule for me really came out of that, because they're like, hey, we need about 20 hours a week. Can you give us 20 hours a week? I don't think it'll be more than about 20 hours a week. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I can only work 20 hours a week. This could work. And by and large, I got those opportunities through my professional network, and I would just be straight up with them. I'd say, look, I got some things going on at home. If you need more than 20 hours a week, let's just talk about that right now, because you need to get somebody else. And I would just always be completely straight up with them, because it would put a risk. It would put a risk to them if they needed more time and I couldn't give it. So it just kind of happened organically, and the whole mentor thing started, I want to say 5 years ago, like 2015. I was looking for some new client work. I needed something besides I had like 2 agency jobs going, and I was just looking around, and I saw an opportunity to provide mentoring services for an online boot camp. And it was a brand new thing. It was a startup, and it looked like it would be about 10 hours a week. And I wasn't doing the 20 hours a week thing. I had time available, and I thought, hey, I've been doing this a long time. I wonder, I'll bet I could probably help somebody. And I signed up for their course as if I was a student. I wanted to test drive it, and I really liked the approach they had, because it's very similar to the real world. And so I applied, and they hired me, and they've been a client for over 5 years now. So that really started with that opportunity, and that boot camp. They take complete career changers who may not have any design experience or anything, and they have a year-long program that they put them through. It's a self-paced thing, and then I meet with the students every other week. I check on their work regularly with video reviews, but I'll meet with them over Skype or Zoom, but like every other week, just to see how they're doing. And it's a very small piece of my overall puzzle right now, but I think that's where the seed for mentoring germinated, because I really, really enjoy it. And then towards the end of my my formal work at the last agency I was at, I was mentoring a lot of younger producers. So it just seemed like a good fit, and I really enjoyed doing it.
Awesome. I think that's really excellent that, you saw an opportunity there and pursued it, and turned out to be something that you actually really deeply enjoyed. I saw your most recent email was about how life exists outside of your comfort zone. And I definitely relate to that and see a little bit of that in this circumstance. And I'm curious, I know for me, my position within my own company has shifted from production to a much more mentor-oriented role. How has mentoring shifted your perspective of UX design or UX anything?
Well, a couple of things have happened. Time has gone on. I've been in the UX space for about 13 years. It's absolutely blown up in the last 5 years. What's happening, which is unfortunate, is there's like UX, the brand, if you will, for lack of a better term, is like, wow, UX is so cool. And then there's actually the work that needs to be done. And the actual UX work in the context of a company or an agency, it's messy. There's just, nobody knows what a project's going to be at the very beginning. It's very abstract. And a lot of what I do is I just, basically show up with an outline, and then we all kind of have to work together as a team to create the vision of what that is. I've always felt that the role of the user experience designer, I don't craft the experience. I hold the vision of the team. I hold the vision of the client. I help articulate that song that everyone is singing together. It's like I create the sheet music, if you will, in terms of like the sitemap and the wireframes and stuff. And with the advent of things like Agile and Scrum, which are important, they're good ways for software to get built quickly, but it's been going by another name for many years. We would always just divvy up the work at the agency and split it out as best we could. I think there's a lot of hyperbole that's in the industry now versus reality. And then there's also something I call skipping to pretty. A lot of people don't want to put the time and effort needed to do research. They don't want to sketch out stuff. They want to just skip right to the pretty pictures, and especially clients, because clients have a hard time understanding wireframes and just schematics or anything that's not concrete. They want to paint the house before the house has been built, basically. And, so there's just kind of sifting through all that. There's a lot of noise out there. There's noise everywhere in social media now. So that's just one of the things I've seen change quite a bit, and I've been moving away from that. And I think that's one of the reasons mentoring appeals to me so much. Is I'm able to help younger people who are getting either at the beginning or I work a lot now with more mid to senior level people. I help them cut through that noise and really try to find out what's special about them and what they can bring to their organization or to their own businesses, to really bring things forward in a way that's effective for them and the people they work with.
Wow. I think that's beautifully put and quite succinct. I do I know we were going to chat a little bit more about the group training program and stuff, but I do have a few more questions to kind of dig in here. I also just want to reflect on something that you said that really struck me, which is that you don't create the experience, you hold the vision. I think that resonates really strongly for me because what I'm hearing is that the challenge of designing something that's effective is that there are all of these different kind of people and opinions, and there's kind of this confusion at the beginning of a project about what it's actually finally going to consist of and look like. And you, through those kind of differing perspectives and shifting contexts, continue to kind of check in, validate the kind of vision and desires against the research and hold it steady so that despite any changes that happen, you're ultimately achieving that vision that is shared. Is that what I'm hearing?
We try.
That's all you can really do.
Yeah, it's I wish I could say every project is executed according to the original vision, but that's not true because the more it's like a backwards onion. If you ever peeled an onion, the more information you get a clearer picture of what it is you need to build and how it needs to function. And yes, there are, especially at the corporate level, there are dozens of opinions. And, there's shareholders that need to be appeased and all sorts of stuff that happen. Websites and apps are people in politics, always have been, always will be. And I think it's very, very important for designers to understand that because the business is always going to come first, even before the users, because without a business, there aren't users. So yeah, it's like the more concrete things you get on, I would say most of the things I have worked on are usually about 80% of the original vision, 60 to 80%, depending on the amount of politics involved and the budgets. There's always budget constraints. There's always all sorts of stuff. The whole thing with websites and apps is there's people involved.
Yes.
The robots haven't taken over yet. So as long as there's humans involved, there's going to be lots of different opinions and lots of different needs and hopefully constructive arguments. But I think one of the other things that UX designers do, we're kind of like the diplomats of the project because at least one of the things I've tried to do is just try to be like that calm in the room to just really focus on the work, keep the emotions out of it as best you can. Everybody should be proud of their work, but there's in a business context, there's rarely any reason to get emotional about stuff. But as you know, websites and app projects can get very emotional, and it's important to keep those things tempered.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny things that you're saying, even including the kind of holding the vision stuff. They just correlate so strongly to experiences that we've had, and I'm sure that not every kind of copywriter or copywriting service or company experiences this in the same way. But for us, because we are so process driven. That is a huge part of every project. I'm so glad that you said that. You know, these projects are full of people, and when you're working with things that are potentially charged and the overall vision direction for the project and how all the pieces fit together, as you said, especially for some people, you know, desire to skip a little bit faster to the prettier part. You know, everybody has their own priorities that are potentially conflicting about what they want out of the project. And there's only so much you can do to bring that to life. You know, this is something that we definitely experience with copywriting, where copy and writing can often be very, very either like charged or emotional for people because their website or their business feels like an extension of themselves. And I would say one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest opportunities is being able to bring that calm focus to it and be like, oh, okay, I can see that you're having a really strong reaction to these words, but you know, what if we were to shift this here? What if we were to shift this here? And kind of remaining that calm, chill presence is one of the things that, you know, I didn't necessarily set out to do as part of the copywriting world, but I would say is one of the most critical roles that we fulfill. And that kind of leads me to another question, which is for those people who are, you know, potentially hiring a UX designer for a project, but aren't necessarily, you know, super experienced in that field themselves. How do the fields of kind of copy and UX interact? Is it kind of UX first that informs the copy, or what does that look like in your experience for best success?
That is such a great question, and it's evolving. I think the ideal thing would be if you could sit with a business owner, open a text file, and sketch out the architecture of the site with the words with them right there. If you, me, and the business owner could sit down with just a text file and, you know, obviously have some research behind all the things that we were talking about, but we could get the skeleton of the site together with a brief from you or someone on your team that kind of talked about the tone and the key messaging. I think key messaging and content strategy really need to come first, but they don't really have anywhere to live until the initial structure takes place. So I've always viewed content strategy and UX work as, you know, kind of two sides of the same coin, if that makes sense. I've done some content strategy work, but not nearly as much on the design as the design and research stuff that I've done. But yeah, it's almost like that. They almost have to happen in tandem. I have always tried to get the writer in the room if there was going to be a writer on my projects as soon as possible. I'm a big believer in collaboration, and I want the tech lead there. I want the content strategist there, along with the client, along with the producer, along with the creative director, because it gets back to that idea of we have to sing the same song. And nobody knows what the song is until they sit around and do some rehearsing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, it kind of jogs my memory that I don't know if you know this, but a really, really critical part of our process, which is the content strategy, which we are kind of evolving to call the copy reference guide, was actually germinated from a conversation with you about this similar thing, which was kind of where do these two things kind of interact and talk? And you were like, well, have you considered a brief to make sure everyone's on the same page? And I was like, huh. And that actually evolved into, I would say, the most valuable part of our process right now. People come to us for the writing, but that content strategy at the beginning, or the copy reference guide that sets the audience, key messaging, and tone, are the three anchor threads of it, is really critical. And one of those things that people don't necessarily expect, but retains value long after the project is done as well. So that's really cool.
That's one of the things we introduced on the Dove project in the mid-2000s was, you know, the company paid for me to get my PMP project management. I mean, I was a super nerdy project manager. But it was really valuable. And one of the things we instituted was this idea of a project charter, which, you know, there's always a creative brief, but the project charter was even a higher level than the brief because it was just one page. It's like, who's the audience? What does this thing need to do? How do we measure success? and who needs to be a part of it. And it's just this simple one-page thing that anybody could understand, but that gets people started. And just getting off, starting on the right foot is half the battle, I think. I really believe that's great that works for you all. Because your strategy is everything. And it gets back to those two fundamental questions, that are at the heart for me of UX design. Is like, what does it need to do for the user? What does it need to do for the business?
Yep, that's actually how we train our team to set goals. We're like, we always need to understand that a goal has two parts. There is the value to the audience, the person who is absorbing the copy on that page. And then there's the value to the people who are writing that page. And those things need to intersect and overlap on that page. And in fact, one of our more recent projects has evolved this even further, where we now have kind of our basic, what we call the reference guide. And then we also, if there is a growth element or there are kind of longer term goals in the business, we also now do a growth strategy after that process, which is much more what you're saying. It's really like, okay, what are the goals? What are some of the things we're doing to get there? What does it look like? And then we can come back to that. And it's simple, but it's iterative and something that can be compared against. That's super valuable. Anyway, this is great. I'm really appreciating this conversation. I think there's lots of value here. But I want to just zero in a little bit more on your 20-hour a week work week, because that is something that I think that a lot of our listeners, that's kind of the dream. Now, as you said, for you, your circumstances made it kind of easy to say no to things in the sense that you know what your values are very strongly. But what I am curious about as someone who has just in the last 6 months been kind of reducing and restricting my own hours, within those 20 hours a week, let's say outside of the actual, work that you do in terms of like mentoring and coaching, on more of the leadership side of your own business, how do you prioritize what to spend your time on in terms of, like marketing activities or in terms of, the non-client work that you do?
So much of it involves elimination. Because I have to get really ruthless with the 80-20 principle. And you're familiar with that, right? The Pareto principle. So it's really 80-20. And then there's this really fun saying that I got from, again, I do a lot of musician analogies because I'm still a musician. So there's a guy, Derek Sivers. He was a founder of CD Baby, and he sold the company for $22 million back in the day. But he had this great phrase, which I have adopted this year. I listened to his audiobook on the way home from a trip back in June, and very simple. It's like, if it's not hell yeah, then say no. And I wrote a blog post about this a while back, but I've really had to eliminate a lot of stuff. If something doesn't resonate with me, if I really don't want to do it, I used to be a real people pleaser. I'm really not that much of a people pleaser anymore. I have really worked hard to practice my no's. NO, not NOSE. That's one of the benefits of having been a project manager for so long. You get really good at saying no, and then you explain why you have to say no. Not everybody wants to hear no, but that's no. So anyway, so much of it, to answer your question, is about elimination. About, is this really the highest and best use of my time? If I'm going to have a meeting with someone, I want to have a very clear purpose for that meeting. I want to know what I'm going to come away with. And then I don't do that many meetings anymore. Honestly, I used to have meetings 5 days a week. In 2020, I'm only going to do them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I was doing them Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I need more time to build the business. So Mondays for me are all about the business, and just trying to get out. My weekly email is really my biggest marketing driver, and then making sure the SEO on my site is pretty solid. But that's pretty much all I do. Pretty much. And then podcast opportunities like this, and then servicing customers.
Wow. That's simple, but not easy.
You just get really good at saying no. And then you have to really decide, what is worth my time? Is this worth my time? And there's a lot, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And I had to get at a place where I was okay with that. There was a time I got somebody read my blog a couple of years ago and flew me out to do some speaking in Portland, and I had a wonderful time. And I was like, wow, I want to be a speaker. I'm going to do speaking gigs every quarter. And then I realized the travel and the effort it was going to take to get those things booked. And I was like, I can't do that. I have a family at home. What am I thinking? So the speaking thing evaporated because, I do not have time for it. As much as I would enjoy it, I'm not going to do it.
So what I'm hearing is kind of a combination of what I call the full body yes, the heck yeah, which is totally a land or a yardstick that I've been trying to leverage a little bit more for myself. Kind of evaluating really strongly which activities can be that 20% that drives the 80%, right? Which is the Pareto principle. And also checking in with, your like top values and priorities and kind of the relative, prices on that, so to speak, or on the price of doing things that potentially conflict with that, to be more specific.
Yeah, there's currency besides cash. You have to decide what your most valuable currency is, and for me, it's time freedom. It really is, and I worked a normal job long enough to know that I never ever want to do that again. and I feel so blessed to be able to do what I do now. I never realized, when this whole thing started for me, I never imagined that it would turn into a full-time income. That was just a real miracle. And I don't think I would have been brave enough to go out and do what I needed to do if I didn't, if I didn't have the challenges at home that it just had to happen, there wasn't a choice really. So.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate and respect how you acknowledge that even though the challenges at home that you faced, I'm sure have had their own impact, which, obviously we don't need to go into and stuff here, but that, at the same time, it sounds like to some degree it's allowed you and not just allowed you, but pushed you to pursue a life that is like quite intentional in terms of protecting the things that you value and protecting, the joy that you experience. Is that?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I definitely, I needed a kick. And I got one. But the good news is everything's fine. My daughter's recovering. And
awesome.
And that's a really exciting thing. But there's still a lot of restrictions on what we can and can't do. And I'm so thankful that I can be a mom and that I can run this little business. I mean, it's such a micro business. It's not a big deal at all. But it does help me provide for the family, and that's what I need it to do.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it's making an impact, like what you described, which is, pushing back against the just pretty to create something that is truly meaningful and sits in that space between what, the two parties involved need. And teaching other people to do that, that is of extreme value, even if over the course of your whole career, and I suspect it's many, many more than this, you only shifted, 5 producers into this, set of values and approach. I think the world would still be an incredibly more valuable place for it. It would be a better place for it. That's incredibly valuable stuff to do. So just gonna push back a little bit there, which is that it's an incredibly micro business, but I do think that the impact that you make is larger than just micro.
Thank you. I have helped several younger designers especially in the last year. It's been very, very satisfying to help them move ahead in their careers. I've helped a couple of people get jobs at Google. I've helped people get jobs at Amazon, at Fidelity, PayPal, Accenture, just a lot of big companies and a lot of lesser known firms as well. And they're just finding me on the website, and then we take the coaching stuff from there.
Wow, that's amazing. And I feel like we could, do a whole episode just on how, your SEO and marketing have kind of evolved with the years. Because I remember the very first email that you sent out. And I'll admit, I'm quite impressed that you still send out emails super regularly. Even, we're in this podcast journey, and we do release a podcast weekly. And that has really shown me my team handles most of it. I just do the interviews basically. And it's a big commitment to release content every week. Never mind, keep it within 20 hours, do great work, do all this other stuff as well. So that's really amazing. I do have a few more questions, but one question I think that our listeners would really appreciate that I just wanted to touch on is, if somebody, let's say, is, a leader in a marketing company or, an agency of some kind, What are some of the kind of green flags that say that this would be a really, really important project to bring in a UX designer on? I'm sure like us, every project, you probably believe that every project would benefit from it. But, for listeners who are kind of not sure whether to bring in that contractor, sell their clients on that expense, what are some of the things that you would say are really critical to kind of look out for?
I would agree that it's not necessary on tiny little brochure websites. That's pretty straightforward. But if there's any type of complexity, if you've got an e-commerce engine, if you've got, a lot of it has to do with, what's the technical requirement. If you don't understand the technology behind the project that you need to launch. So if you've got, we had a client last year who had a big e-commerce initiative, but there were 2 suppliers on the back end. And that posed all sorts of technical integration and fulfillment problems on the back end that nobody had thought through. Through the UX design process, we were able to identify those things before they became a problem. Because it's just such deep discovery, If you don't know who your audience is, if you don't know what it is you need to accomplish, I'm a big believer in get the strategist in there. If someone like yourself can ask those questions and get the discovery handled in such a way that you don't need somebody on the structural side to kind of map stuff out, then more power to you. But I think the larger the initiative, say, I don't know, everybody wants a ballpark. Everything's different. If your website, 20 pages or more, to use an archaic, because pages scroll forever now.
Yeah.
There's, if you're looking at multiple sections, if you've got most sections, most websites shouldn't have really more than 4 or 5 sections, but within there, if you've got these huge mega menus, you're going to need help defining all of that. You're going to need help naming it. A lot of companies will just, use 3, 4, or 5 words for a navigation item. That's not going to work. I feel your pain, right? You have to get 1 or 2 words, and then God help you if you translate it in German.
Yeah.
So, most of my career has been on large corporate initiatives, for multi-million-dollar companies.
Mm-hmm.
I've only done a few smaller businesses. So I would say if it's really the size of the business and the product set that they need to represent is going to define that need. So if it's a big company, if it's like, say, 5 million or more, they're probably going to need somebody like me.
That makes a lot of sense.
Otherwise, have fun with WordPress.
Yeah. And I will say, just as a consumer, I wish that more e-commerce websites or big businesses with websites explored having an awesome UX person on board. Here in Canada, we have a company called Canadian Tire, which I will admit is not it's kind of like a hardware store type thing, hardware department store. And it's one of those places that I just generally find the people to be fairly unhelpful when I go in. Maybe it's got cheaper prices, but it's really frustrating. But they have the absolute best UX on their web. I can tell, I can tell that somebody with critical thinking and research designed this and the technology behind it. It will tell you in the store how much of a product is in stock and in what aisle it is. It'll tell you all of this amazing information. And I'm like, anyway, I just, so it's transformed this company from a place where I dread going to my first go-to because the website is just so aligned with my needs as a user. And that's really impressive. So yeah, definitely can see that.
That's the way I feel about the Shake Shack app.
I find that now that we're on, or for me, who is a little bit newer in the industry, also just generally have only been alive long enough to do so many things. But it just blows my mind how much I notice and obsess and nerd out over things like copywriting and UX now. Yay.
Well, the things that you're close to, you start noticing. My family gets really annoyed with me because I see the user experience and everything. From customer service, we had a food delivery service that was messing up, and the joke in our house with my daughter, she's like, "Oh, that's a bad user experience, Mom." I'm like, "Yeah, right on."
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I can see that we are ticking along in terms of time. It has just flown away on me. Holy cow. And I do want to make sure that we touch a little bit on your group training program. So one of the kind of questions that I had, is it sounds like you started out doing mentoring for a program that was already established. I know a lot of people, a lot of our listeners, a lot of our partners have considered doing some sort of training or group training or something like that. What are some of the challenges that you experienced, moving from, I guess, platforms where things were set up and you more just had to kind of show up and do a certain amount of legwork to creating that for yourself and your own company?
Well, it just kind of grew out of a need from the client that I have. I'm still working with them. They work with real beginners, very junior people who are just getting started in the agency. And it seemed to me, especially as my blog developed, my audience of my blog is actually more mid to senior level people, most of that audience. And there didn't seem to be anything for them. So I kind of asked this question. This is back in 2016. I was like, I wonder, I'd been doing a lot of mentoring for the platform for a little over a year and a half. I'm like, I wonder if I could do this for more seasoned people. So really it was just a question. I wonder if there's a need for it. So I slapped a page up on my site offering coaching services. And within 2 weeks, somebody bought. And it just kind of grew organically from there. And then I was like, wow. And the people that were reaching out were mid to senior level. And so I started gearing my content more towards that. Mm-hmm. And it really did grow organically. It was, over the first year, it was like 5% of my business. Then it was 10% of my business. This year, the coaching piece and my coaching piece, not just the client stuff, is 50% of my business now. And it's, wow. It's heading to the whole thing. So then what happened was, everybody, I was getting a lot of encouragement to grow my email list, grow your email list. And so I was doing that. But then I noticed during the coaching process, I started having a lot of very similar conversations. And then I did some surveys with the audience and got a lot of the same kind of stuff back. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I could make a version of this so that I don't have to meet one-on-one with so many people. I can still offer value. I can reach more people. There's a lot of people. I'm very expensive. People don't want to pay the full price for my one-on-one coaching services. So I'm like, all right, what's a way I can do this so that it can be more accessible to people? I can help more people. I don't have to be the bottleneck because there's only one of me. And it's really not something that you can kind of outsource. So I just noticed I was having a lot of the same kind of conversations, and we have a mentor who encourages us to package our exhaust, as it were, in the IP. So I just started taking a lot of notes, and then I just said, hey, I wonder if I can pre-sell this. So back in November, I just sketched out an outline of what the usual course of each one. I sell a 4-call package. And then I was like, I think I can bookend it, with an intro call and then an end call, and then put the 4 steps in between. So it'd be like a nice 6-module thing. I wonder if I could do this. So again, like I did with the original coaching, I just put up a page. You just got to test this stuff. I started talking about it to my audience, and I got some good feedback. And then I just kind of did the guerrilla Jeff Walker style, just kind of teased it out over a couple of emails. And then I put up the page and was hoping somebody would bite. I think I could have done a better job of interviewing past customers. Mm-hmm. I had done like some cursory stuff, but I think for the next rollout, I'm going to do a lot more customer interviews just to see, because it didn't sell as well as I had hoped, but it sold well enough for me to create it. And I'm executing on it right now. I'm having a blast, and it is going to turn into an evergreen program that I'm going to sell to my list going forward. But right now I'm doing the live program. We're about halfway done, and the clients that signed up are just awesome, and I'm learning a lot from them, and I think they're getting a lot out of it.
Awesome. So if I were to, pull some of the gold nuggets, so to speak, that I heard there from you, I'm hearing that number one is that it was an iterative process, something that I love saying, in the sense that it grew out of a need, and you didn't just start by doing a full-on, 6-session group coaching program, etc. It sounds like you started with coaching, gauged interest, got some feedback about what it could look like, accepted some people into the coaching after you got some interest, spent some time on it. And then from there, continue to reflect about, once again, if I'm hearing kind of the 80-20, how can you do this in the way that delivers maximum value to the client while also delivering maximum value to you? And from there, iterate it on it and have a plan even for your next iteration. So starting simple.
It's you can't always do what you want to do. You got to do what your audience needs. And it's like, I really try to key in, just like with any UX work that I do for clients. Like I really try to key into what's the problem they're trying to solve and how can I help them figure it out. And really what happened, at least on the career coaching side, was a lot of the same conversations started happening, and which gave my program much needed structure. I mean, the first couple of years I was winging it. I was just talking to people, just trying to figure out what do they need? How can I help them? And then just over time, you get that kind of, it's just all the iterative feedback, as you said, is really what helped me put the structure together. And then really just, drawing a line. You have to draw a picture and just test it out and see if it works. And so far it's working pretty well, but I'm going to have to make a couple of adjustments. For example, one of the modules in this current 6 thing, I'm going to have to switch it around. Module 4 needs to be number 5. Number 5 needs to be number 4. But the only way I'm learning that is by actually doing it and figuring out what my clients need.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I do want to respect your time and wind us down into the lightning round. But I do have one more question around that, which is just that, as the UX professional that you are, did you do any kind of formalized research around this, like give out polls or et cetera? Or was it just kind of organic, like asking for feedback, absorbing it, and kind of gauging, as you said, what you were hearing over and over again?
No, I would ask. I'd spend time with my clients before they'd buy the call package. I'd get formal feedback from them. Did that? I did some polling of the audience for sure. Did some outreach. I did a few what we call CDIs, customer development interviews, where I would just talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had a very clear avatar in mind. I also have some software on my website that kind of has helped me figure out really who these people are. It's called Right Message, and it's a personalization. I haven't used it to its full extent yet, but it really helped me figure out who is actually on my website. Between that and my email stats, I know for a fact that 50% of my audience is a more senior UX designer. 35% of them are actually thinking about looking for their next job. The rest of them just want to learn. A very small percentage are new to the industry. And that's just by virtue of this little toaster that pops up and asks the user a couple of questions. And thankfully, I've had enough traffic where I got a pretty good sample set.
Awesome. That's really great. As usual, to our listeners, we will include links to these shiny tool. But I do, as always, just nudge you to think about the process and starting simple rather than fixating on the tool, while at the same time acknowledging that I will be looking it up. Cool. Awesome. I like that. So what I'm hearing is like multiple kind of forms of engagement and receiving feedback, but really, an emphasis on real conversations and real data in terms of demographics and need. And that is a combination that, again, probably goes without saying that we value really highly. So I think that's really awesome. All right. Do you have time for 3 more quick questions?
Sure. I just want to underscore that nothing informs design better than real people. And you're never going to know if a design is effective until you have it out there in the world. You can make all sorts of assumptions, but you have to test them.
Thank you for underlining that. It's the same way when it comes to copy, right? Like even we internally are doing some brand work and re-releasing our copy and all this other stuff. And of course we have a team and everyone has an opinion and et cetera. And it's really important to just emphasize over and over again that ultimately it's about what the clients and customers need and want. Just as much or more as it is about your personal opinion. In fact, much more than just your personal opinion, but just as much as even your business needs.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Okay. So first question, what gets you up in the morning?
Coffee. No, just the knowing that I can help people and that I have the freedom to spend my time how I wish right now. It's wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. What's the number one thing that you do to preserve your wellness?
My diet. I am a paleo keto kind of person, and it's making a huge difference for me.
Awesome. I am super, super glad that that's working for you. Diet has been one of the most critical things in my life. And what is the weirdest habit that you have that contributes to your success?
Gosh, never thought. Lightning round. I have to respond quickly.
Yeah. This question usually gives people pause. We might have to reflect on how we present it.
Recently, I have been playing my guitar 20 minutes a day just for fun, and it has helped me relax considerably, and I'm sleeping better, which is really interesting. I think the two are connected.
Huh. That is very interesting. As someone with persistent sleep problems for the last year, I'm very intrigued. Awesome. Okay. Well, for all that question gave you pause, that was a great answer and came to it relatively quickly. As I said, I do want to respect your time, especially knowing how much you hold it dear. So I am going to wrap us up now, but thank you so much, Mary, for sharing. I got a lot out of this interview, and I know that our listeners did too.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So everybody, as mentioned, we will have all of this information on show notes for you. But before we wrap up, just Mary, is there anywhere in particular that users, see too much about user experience, where listeners can find out more about you if they are interested in working with you, subscribing to your blog, any of that kind of fun stuff?
Sure. maryshaw.net/sign up if you want to join the mailing list.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Mary. That wraps us up for today.
Great. Thanks again for having me, Say. Have a great day.
My pleasure. And you as well. And that does it for another amazing episode of the Say It Online podcast. Join us next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe, whether it's iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast player is. It is always, always appreciated. It really makes a difference for us. It helps us get this word out to more people. As always, this episode was brought to you by our sponsor and Say's own business, Anansi Content. If you're a digital agency owner and you're still wasting too much time chasing down content that maybe isn't even all that great, let's talk. We've spent years working on the best process for selling, planning, and delivering amazing conversion content for your client projects. Better yet, we moosh our process to yours so that your client and you have a seamless and amazing experience the entire time through. If you're interested, just go to our website. That's www.anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And just click Let's Talk. I'd love to chat with you. Someone else on the team would also love to chat with you too. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.